Welcome back, I'm Raiden from Blue Gaming, and this week on Raiden Reviews, it's Mad Max Brutal Doom Edition, also known as Rage 2. Developed by id Software and Avalanche Studios, this is the game where the main character's idea of a power-up is taking LSD, MDT, and a combination of every other drug with a 3-letter abbreviation. That dual developer thing is going to be important later, so remember it, and as always, subscribe and enable notifications if you want to be notified whenever I upload the next installment of Raiden Reviews. Now let's get right into this review of Rage 2, starting as always with graphics. Where the first Rage was going for that brown and gray and realistic sort of apocalypse setting, Rage 2 has mostly kept the colors the same, but has added an extra pass of neon and a few areas with some more vegetation. It attempts to show the shift in tone from the first game to its successor. Where the first game was trying to emulate Mad Max 2, its sequel Rage 2 is trying to jump off the deep end like Nicolas Cage and Mandy. If only it was as successful as that movie. Somewhere around 85% of the game is just desert. In fact, it looks a lot like Monument Valley in Arizona, with a bunch of buttes around the place. But then the remaining 15% of the game world is split between a very out-of-place swamp and a forest. The game world might not have changed much from the first game, but the visual effects certainly have. I don't know if id Software took the effects straight out of Doom, but damn, do they look good. I even need to give a shout out to the explosions. They look like mini nukes going off, and they just feel powerful. I wish that some of the guns had better effects around them though. The pulse cannon has these lights around it, and you can hear it vent out heat after you shoot it, making the gun have this aura of awesomeness around it. Whereas most of the other guns, even the wacky ones like the grab dart launcher, just don't have that feeling to them. The shotgun gets a pass though, and I'll talk about that a bit later in the gameplay section, but before that, let's talk about the technical side of the game. When looking around the graphics options of Rage 2, something that stands out is the myriad of resolution scaling options. Resolution scaling is when the game turns down some of the settings to keep with the target frame rate, and here you can change that target frame rate and how much you're willing to have the game turn down settings. I wish that more games offered these options because it allows you to choose between FPS and quality, or a mix of both. Personally, I prefer frame rate, so I let my graphical quality get turned down a bit. The game still looks good though, even on lower settings, and I'm fairly sure that some lower end computers could still run this game with the addition of resolution scaling. Now, let's move on to sound, music, and voice. Much like the visual effects in the game, the sound effects are wonderfully done. Every gun sounds like it could blast a person in half, and when you hear an explosion, you're turning to look at it. If only the cars sounded a tenth as good as the weapons. In Rage 2, you're driving anything from rocket-powered gun platform to the closest thing they can legally get to the Batmobile, and they all sound like the weakest Tesla you've ever heard. And worse than that, sometimes the character's dialogue doesn't even play. The only way that I knew that they were supposed to be saying anything is because I had subtitles turned on. Speaking of voice acting, Rage 2 has the most voice actors I've seen voice both named and extra characters. In fact, out of the 13 main voice actors, only 3 of them voice a single character. There are some notable voice actors here too. Sam Riegel, the voice of the male version of the main character, has roles in other games like Pillars of Eternity, the Amazing Spider-Man games. He played Starscream in the Transformer games, and he even played Donatello in the 2003 run of TMNT. Rage 2 also has Courtney Taylor playing as Major Lusum and a bunch of other voices. You may know her as Ada Wong in some of the older Resident Evil games, and Jack in the Mass Effect series. And as part of Bethesda tradition at this point, Linda Carter makes an appearance as the AI who controls your car, known as Phoenix. There are some decent voice actors here, if only they didn't play such one-dimensional characters. But I'll get to that in the story section. First, let's talk about music here. The music on offer here is this unhinged indie rock that tries to set a tone for the game, but outside of the title track by Andrew WK and the announcement trailer song by Danny Brown, the rest is just forgettable. Although it's not like you're going to be hearing it often. It's just going to be drowned out by the sounds of guns and explosions. Overall, I'd give the music a meh out of 10. Now let's get over to the amazing story in Rage 2. Amazing in the way that I think that this might be the worst story in a game that I've played all year. You play as Walker, a trainee at the Ranger headquarters in Vineland, one of the most well-protected and fortified cities in the Wasteland. In the first 10 minutes of the game, Vineland gets completely decimated by the Authority, who you may remember as the bad guys in the first Rage. Walker gets a real quick promotion from nobody to the last Ranger on Earth and sets off on a journey to complete Project Dagger by orders of his former, now dead, leader. From there, you go meet the other 3 members of Project Dagger, which are Dr. Kvasir, Lusum Hagar, and John Marshall, all returning from the first game. You then complete 2 missions for each of them, and you're finished with Project Dagger. I thought that this was just the end of Act 1, or maybe the midpoint of the game, but nope. After completing 6 missions, you take on the Big Bad Authority to the end of the game. If you were to only do the main story missions, you could probably beat the game in 4 to 5 hours. This leaves no room for character development, so all the characters are one-dimensional. I'm John Marshall, and I'm the information guy, so I gather info on the Authority. I'm Lusum Hagar, and I'm the mayor of Wellspring, so I make all the decisions. I'm Dr. Kvasir, and I'm the mad scientist, so I say a bunch of technobabble and creepy shit. And I'm General Cross, and I'm the bad guy, because I talk about how worthless humans are and how I want to kill them. You get my point. I already said that the writing was bad, but I've seen more character development in a 30-second commercial than what these characters have. I will say what is here is fun to play through, but it's just so freaking short. It's like Avalanche knew they didn't have enough money to pay voice actors for several days, so they just started ripping out parts of the script. I've complained about the story and the characters and the writing enough. Let's move on to gameplay. Most of your time in the game, you're going to be driving around completing world events. These range anywhere from clearing out bandit strongholds to defeating Authority sentry towers to more exciting things like slaying giants and unlocking new abilities and weapons found in arcs. I hope you like doing these world events because to do the main missions, you have to level up Project Dagger members by completing events that correspond to them. Thankfully, the game is held up by its gunplay. This is by far the best part of the game. This is where id Software's contribution to the game shines through. Granted, it plays almost exactly like Doom, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Clearing out a bandit stronghold would be so boring if you didn't have these weapons that made you feel like a complete badass. The shotgun is basically just a copy of the combat shotgun in Doom, but here it's even more powerful than it looks, so I ended up using that for most of the game. Speaking of Doom, the pistol and assault rifle here kinda feel like reskinned and slightly modified versions of their counterparts as well. That's not a downside though. Like I said, the guns are really fun to use. However, the driving is another story entirely. If you've played Mad Max, then you know how the driving in this game feels. Whenever you're on smooth terrain, it works just fine, but as soon as you try to jump or, God forbid, a flip, then you're going to have a bad day. It's like the vehicles are magnetized to the ground or something. This was a big problem in Mad Max, and it's an even bigger problem here, though there are less places to truly screw up the physics in this game. Also, like in Mad Max, there are different vehicles that you can unlock, but only a few of them are actually useful. You can get things like the mobile trader vans or any vehicle that the general populace is driving, but you're going to keep coming back to the Phoenix because it's the only vehicle that you can repair and comes with a wide array of guns. Speaking of a wide array of things, I don't have a wide array of feelings on this game's AI. It's bad. It's real bad. Well, I can't say that. It's about as good as Doom's AI, but here the enemies either run at you and try to hit you, so you just shoot them before that happens, or they try to stay away from you and shoot you, so you just shoot them before that happens. Either way, just keep moving, and the enemies won't really be much of an issue for you, although sometimes they will get a lucky hit in on you, and it can hurt way more than it should. There are 4 difficulties in the game, so you can tune how much damage you want to take. I found myself wanting a difficulty in between normal and hard, so I just put on hard and went with it. At this point, I think I've covered everything, so let's move on to my final thoughts and give this game a score. For the most part, this is just another par for the course Avalanche game, which is to say not terrible, but it really could have used another 6 months to a year to flesh some parts out. This time, though, it was here to back up Avalanche, and their part really shines. My favorite fights were definitely the giants, but I wish that there was more of them and that they were a bit more varied, because you end up fighting the same kind of giant somewhere around 5 times during the game. The story wasn't very good, and the characters, like I said, were very one-dimensional, but thankfully you're able to skip right on past that. Sadly though, in the end, there isn't really much to do in the game. I finished the campaign and about half of the world events in only 13 hours, and really it would only take another 10 or so to complete everything. Now, let's move on to giving Rage 2 a score. If you don't know my scoring system, I don't rate games with a number. Instead, they're either a buy, wait for a sale, or don't bother, and Rage 2 has to be a wait for a sale. While the gunplay is an extension of Doom's combat, the game that it found itself in is just not that good. If Rage 2 had different, less interesting gunplay, then I would even give it a don't bother because there would be no redeeming qualities. But I can see that some people really enjoy what is basically an open world Doom, and that's why I gave it a wait for a sale score. Down at about half price, this game would be an absolute blast, but at full price, I just can't see a way of recommending it. And that is all that I have for my review of Rage 2. If you liked it, then hit the like button. If you didn't like it, then hit the dislike button and tell me why in the comments. I also stream on Twitch almost every day, and I post on Twitter whenever I go live or post a video. Links to both of those are in the description. As always, I'm Raiden from Blue Gaming, and I'll see you guys in the next one.